Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to another edition of my canal series, specifically Secrets of the Stroudwater. That there is the Stroudwater Canal. I'm just to the south of the town of Stonehouse in the county of Gloucestershire. It's a shorter one today. Let me tell you a little bit of the secrets of this area, but specifically I'll be telling you the secret of what lies behind me. Some of you are probably already ahead of me and recognise it, but more about that in a bit. I've done several in my Secrets of the Stroudwater videos here on West Country Wanderings, but if you're new to these, just to tell you that this was the third canal constructed in this area and the fourth one actually planned. I've done other videos looking at two of the previous ones, both the Cambridge Canal and the Kemet Canal. In fact, the Kemet Canal, you can see remains of that, the terminus of it. It lies in a field just below the other side of the Stroudwater Canal at this location, quite close to St Sire's Church. There are two arms of the River Froome there, one that flows close to Stonehouse Mill, which is now the Stonehouse Paper and Bag Mill, but you can see where sections of it have become strengthened to take out the curves. The Kemet Canal was actually the very first canal in the entire world to use containerised freight system, so the goods will be packaged up into containers and moved on lifts to get round the various weirs to serve the mills in this part of the Froome Valley here in Gloucestershire. That's not a subject for this one. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link to that one at the end of this video. So back to the Stroudwater in this location. Well, when this canal was built right through this part of the valley where the river is just below us, we're on an embankment here, they actually had to take out a slice of the graveyard here at St Sire's, so they lost some of the land. I'm not sure what happened to the gravestones that needed to be moved. Perhaps they were moved back into part of the graveyard. Behind the camera at the moment though is an expanded part of the graveyard which was opened up I think about 30 or 40 years ago now. So that is interesting, but also a gentleman is buried in this graveyard who has connections to what lies behind me. However, what does lie behind me can be summed up in just one word, and that word is nutshell. But what we have here in a nutshell is in fact three things. We have this bridge, and we also have a cottage and a house. So the cottage is there, we'll insert some photographs of it now. There's the bridge, and on the Stroud side of Nutshell Bridge is Nutshell House. All of the three items here making up the Nutshell package in effect were built here on Stroudwater Company's land in 1778, and they were commissioned by the company. However, and this is part of our enigma today, they were never owned by the company. So what do we actually have here? So what in fact we have as residences for people on the Stroudwater Canal, in effect a lookout. But our first question, our first enigma if you like of the whole nutshell package is why would the Stroudwater Canal need a lookout at this location? If you stand on Nutshell Bridge, and I'll again insert a little bit of video clips here, you've got a good visibility both down along the Stroudwater Canal in the direction of the River Severn, not as far as that, but you can certainly see for a good half a mile towards the ocean where the Midland Railway crosses over the top of the canal. That was subject to one of my extended updates looking at the replacement of that bridge carrying the Midland Railway over the ocean some 3 years ago. In fact, you'll probably hear railway traffic going up and down as I'm delivering this to you today. So that was the first thing. In the other direction you can make out as far as what is known as Bridge End Bridge, and also right down to Stonehouse Wharf, which I'll come on to towards the end of this video. So a lookout, but why? Well, nobody really knows the answer to that one. Now, lookouts have been built on canals previously. Normally they're to look out on down to banks of locks or wharves or maintenance yards for the canals. But there's nothing like that in this area along the Stroudwater. There are no locks. The nearest lock in that direction is towards Ryford, and it's some way down that way till we get to the flight of the Eastington lock. So no locks, there was no maintenance yards here, and the only wharf was, as I say, a bit further along at Stonehouse Wharf. But if it was to look at that, then why didn't they build it closer to Stonehouse Wharf? But they didn't. So Enigma 1, we just simply do not know why this was built at this location. Now, in the grounds of Nutshell House there is in fact a coal pen, and that coal pen was used for storing coal that would have been probably brought across maybe from below Pill in the Forest of Dean, or down from the Worcestershire and Staffordshire coalfields down via the River Severn and the Worcester-Birmingham Canal to this point here, unloaded and then stored there to use at Stonehouse Mill, and possibly later on at Stanley Mill. There are another one still in existence at Ryford, by Ryford Bridge there. You can see that one. There's no evidence of this one here, but there was in Nutshell House itself. So you can see it had strong links to the Stroudwater Canal. But I say our enigma is the fact that in the records, and there are very extensive records of the Stroudwater Canal in the archives, you've got various minutes, but you cannot see anything relating to the fact that the Stroudwater Canal ever owned either the house or the cottage or indeed the bridge. Now, when I was researching to make this Secret of the Stroudwater episode, one of the most surprising things I came across, and I've been familiar with this bridge because it is like an identifier. It was used originally as the main kind of logo of the Stroudwater Canal Trust in its embryonic years in the 1970s. Underneath the abutment of Nutshell Bridge there is a secret, and that secret is it houses a tunnel, and the tunnel connects Nutshell House, as I say, it's on the Stroudwater side, the Stroud end of the canal, to Nutshell Cottage. It goes right inside the abutment, linking the two together. In actual fact, there are steps down in the kitchen of Nutshell House, connecting it right through to the cottage. But again, nobody knows the purpose of that, but I'll come on to a theory that one of the Stroudwater Canal historians has about it. But yes, amazing tunnel between the house and the cottage right through the centre of the abutment of the bridge. Now, there are several local theories as to why Nutshell House and Nutshell Cottage were built right next to the canal here, Stroudwater, just outside the town of Stonehouse. One of those local theories, it was built, specifically the cottage, to house the navvies. Well, there's a couple of problems with that theory. Navvies are only in an area temporarily unless they're building a major construction project like the Sapperton Tunnel further along to the east of here on the Thames and Severn Canal. Navvies generally only work in an area for probably a year at the most, so why would you go to the trouble of building a building like that? Very grand and very substantial, and certainly very permanent, as it still stands strongly today, some nearly 250 years later, next to the Stroudwater Canal, to house the navvies who would only be here for a year at best part, building this section of the Stroudwater. So I don't really go along with that theory at all. However, there is another theory. Now, Nutshell Bridge itself is totally original. As I say, it was built in 1778, the same time as the cottage and the house. Has been repaired a number of times with the famous blue bricks commonly seen on railways, of course, specifically the Midland Railway, which is perhaps where they originated from. In more recent times, it was repaired, I think, around 1990, 1991, with the help of Cullimores, a local well-known gravel people. Well, they extract gravel, don't they, from Frampton-on-Severn, and now in Worcestershire near Bredon as well. So they did some work on it, or they certainly paid and helped to have this restored. In fact, I've got a photograph showing you this bridge being repaired in 1987, earlier to that. I'll include that now. So it's fascinating to see how they did that. So the bridge has never been replaced. As I say, it's been repaired and restored and maintained, but it is still complete as it was in 1778, as are largely the house and the cottage as well. Now, before I go back to our story about Nutshell and tell you what a local historian thought about it, which is really fascinating and interesting, I'm just going to take you over now to Stonehouse Wharf. well, with my camera. So I went over there to film a little bit about Stonehouse Wharf, which had a couple of alternative names. Now, Stonehouse Cross Wharf, to give it its full title, is sited close to what was a crossroads, an important crossroads, where the present-day A419, that's the road that goes between junction 13 of the M5 right into the heart of Stroud, about 5 miles to the east of the M5. And there was another road that crossed over it from Regent Street in the town of Stonehouse right to Bridgend, like a suburb or enclave, little area outside of the town of Stonehouse, crossing over the canal using Bridgend Bridge into Bridgend, where of course it meets the River Froome. So it's sited there for an important reason. Whenever goods, specifically coal, but other goods as well, were brought down to unloaded at Stonehouse Cross Wharf, they would then need to be taken on by road, because they were manhandled literally by men, and it probably was men in those days, to take them out of the boats and into carts and then taken to wherever they needed to be, probably into one of the mills nearby in the Froome Valley, or into the towns of Stonehouse or Stroud, or one of the neighbouring villages as well. So it was a really good to have that crossroads there, a major road paralleling the River Froome, and two important routes going both north and south at that location. Now, there was a wharf house at Stonehouse Cross Wharf, and it was still there, I think, to the early 1980s. And when you could see it, and I'm not sure that I do have a photograph of it, if I do, I'll go in my archives. It'll be appearing on the screen now, but I don't think I do. It had a very, very similar appearance to this, the Nutshell Bridge, the Nutshell Cottage, and Nutshell House. And it was built, as I say, just a couple of years after the Stroudwater Canal opened. In the early 19th century, some probably about 45 years after the Stroudwater Canal opened, a boat arrived regularly, and it actually came from Bristol. So it went out following the tidal River Avon and up the River Severn, and then in those days, before of course the Sharpness Gloucester Canal was built, to Framalode, and then across the Stroudwater to just up from here to the Stonehouse Wharf, Stonehouse Cross Wharf, and it unloaded not coal but groceries, because Bristol being a major city, they brought in from trade lots of fruit, vegetables from all over the world into the centre of Bristol. And the Stroud packet brought it out of Bristol Harbour right up to here to Stonehouse to be unloaded, and then, yes, you guessed it, into carts to be taken into local towns. 100 years later, in the early part of the 20th century, Stonehouse Wharf was taken over by a local trader. He actually leased Stonehouse Wharf site from the Stroudwater Canal Company, which is still in existence, by the way. It's completely separate to the Cotswold Canals Trust. He leased it, but he didn't own any boats of his own. Now, a few miles to the east of here is Chalford, and Chalford had the famous Smart Brothers, and they had boats of their own, many, many boats serving the village of Chalford on the Thames and Severn Canal. But Mr. Penn didn't own any boats at all, but he leased them regularly to provide trade into and out of the town here in Stonehouse to serve the needs of both the local shops and also the nearby mills as well. Towards the end of the 20th century, around the early 1990s I believe, the whole of the Stonehouse Wharf site had been developed. Long after Mr. Penn had left, it was used as a local haulage company. The whole thing fell into disrepair, including the aforementioned wharf house, which was sadly demolished. No remains of that now, although it is now a really pleasant estate with the Stonehouse Wharf site itself completely rebuilt. So when the canal reopens again and connects to the network at Saw Junction, it can be used again for mooring narrow boats. Now, my collection of books that I have about the Stroudwater Canal, there's a really excellent one. They're all pretty well researched. And you also have Humphrey Household's excellent book about the Thames and Severn Canal. If you're really interested in that and the canals, highly recommend those. And I'll put a link to some of them at the end of the video. Lots, well, I think they're all out of print now, but you can often pick them up on various different sites. Joan Tucker, who lived nearby in Stroud, I believe, she wrote a book again in the 1990s. She actually owned a bookshop, a really good bookshop near the railway station in Stroud. She wrote a great book about the history of the Stroudwater, and she uncovered a few things. One of those, that this nutshell, the bridge, the cottage and the house was built not for Stroudwater Canal Company, although it was their land in this area, but for one Edward Hill. So who was this mysterious Edward Hill? Well, we're not entirely sure. There is a little bit of background to him. He did get married. He was an entrepreneur. He had connections to businesses in both Worcestershire and the city of Worcester, and to here in the Froome Valley in Stroud, all the areas around here. Had lots of links, lots of different things. So he, in effect, had this built, according to the notes, possibly. Also, this bridge then became known not as Nutshell Bridge, but as Hills Bridge. How it turned out of favour from becoming Hills Bridge to Nutshell Bridge, well, those are just simply lost in the midst of time. Now, the other thing that Joan Tucker discovered was that Edward Hill didn't have it built as a dwelling, but as a warehouse. She goes on to speculate that that tunnel that we talk about underneath the abutment here, Nutshell, wasn't a tunnel as such. It was done to build a boathouse to serve the needs of the canal for Mr. Hill's own private concern. Now, we have no way of knowing if this is 100% accurate, but I think there is a lot of solid evidence to suggest that that could well have been the case, because otherwise the tunnel doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it would have made sense to have a boathouse serving a little private wharf here by what is now called Nutshell Bridge. But of course, in reality, we'll never know the absolute truth of what happened here at Nutshell on the Stroudwater Canal. Thank you very much for watching the channel today, and there'll be another one in my Secrets of my companion series, The Secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal, coming up soon. Thanks for watching West Country Wanderings, and I hope to see you on the channel very soon. All the best for now. Cheers now. Goodbye.